All right, good afternoon. Just an announcement that later today, the Secretary General will go to Washington, where Thursday he will attend the state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter, and that is at the invitation of Mr. Carter's family. Secretary General will be back in New York tomorrow afternoon. This morning here in the Security Council, you heard from Geir Pedersen, our Special Envoy for Syria, who briefed via video conference from Geneva. He told Council members that we are ready to work with the caretaker authorities in Syria on how important ideas and steps so far articulated and initiated could be developed towards a credible and inclusive political transition. The Syrian people, he said, and the international community need to get to the next phase right, he said, and we stand ready to do everything we can to facilitate it, to help and to provide support. He confirmed that we are already strengthening our presence and expertise of our political mission in Damascus, and that there is an active UN planning to ensure the delivery as one across all themes of potential support for a credible and inclusive transition. For his part, our Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Tom Fletcher, told Council members that in terms of the humanitarian situation in Syria, there are close to 13 million people that are still facing acute food insecurity and other challenges, especially with the harsh winter upon us. He announced the allocation of an additional $8 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund. This brings the SURF support for scaling up humanitarian operations in Syria up to $20 million. He told Council members also that we are doing all we can to assist those in need, and humanitarian operations are continuing at scale through border crossings with Turkey. Cross-line movements, however, remain a challenge in different parts of the northeast of Syria. Both officials spoke about addressing sanctions, mainly to ensure efficient flow of support into and through Syria. Turning to the situation in Gaza, our colleagues from the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs report that Palestinian civilians endure horrific levels of violence as hostilities continue across the Gaza Strip. UNICEF says that in the first 7 days of this year alone, at least 74 children have reportedly been killed in Gaza. The attack yesterday saw 5 children reportedly killed in al-Masawi. The agency's executive director, Catherine Russell, said the new year has brought more death and suffering to children of Gaza due to attacks, deprivation, and growing exposure to the cold. And we continue to condemn all attacks against civilians in Gaza. The continued lack of basic shelter amid winter temperatures pose serious threats, with more than 1 million children living in makeshift tents. We, along with our partners, are doing whatever we can with the supplies available to provide shelter support to displaced Palestinians. Between the 22nd of December and this past Saturday, our partners assisted more than 2,000 families in Gaza, both in central and southern part of the Strip, with tents and sealing off material. We also assisted about 200 families in the Gaza governorate itself. Meanwhile, OCHA also tells us that Israeli authorities continue to deny UN-led efforts to reach North Gaza governorate, where Palestinians have been under siege now for more than 90 days. Another attempt to reach besieged areas yesterday to deliver critical humanitarian assistance was denied. Across Gaza, Israeli authorities facilitated only 4 out of 8 of our requests for coordinated humanitarian movements. The rest were either denied or canceled due to security or logistical challenges. And a quick update from our colleagues with the World Health Organization, who say they and their partners support the medical evacuation of 6 child patients and 5 companions from Gaza to the United States, as well as 4 patients as 5 companions to Jordan. Meanwhile, Philippe Lazzarini, who you all know is the Commissioner General of UNRWA, said today that we are 3 weeks away from the deadline set by the Israeli Knesset on banning UNRWA's operations. He said that the decision would have had a disastrous impact on the people that UNRWA supports, including education for 50,000 children who go to UNRWA school in the occupied West Bank, and the 650,000 children in Gaza who have been out of school for the 2nd year in a row. other agencies have made clear they cannot fill the void in delivering the humanitarian aid and providing the health care that UNRWA currently does, he said. And one of your colleagues, I think it's Jordan, but he's not here, asked me about UN volunteers working in the region, and I can tell you that we have 82 UN volunteers working across Gaza, the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and they work for 6 agencies, funds, and programs and secretariat entities. Moving to Sudan, our colleagues at the World Food Programme announced today that food distributions in South Khartoum are now complete. Despite the challenges, the insecurity, and the numerous risks our colleagues have to endure in conflict zones, the distribution of vital food and nutrition began on November 29th to help over 70,000 men, women, and children in Mayo and Alingaz districts. These areas are, as we labeled, at risk of famine. In a breakthrough, the WFP-led convoy of 28 trucks arrived in Khartoum on December 25th, making it the largest convoy to reach the capital since the start of the conflict in April of 2023. The convoy includes WFP food assistance, UNICEF supplies, and aid for other partners. The World Food Programme is working to gain access to all parts of Khartoum, taking advantage of the brief lull in fighting to deliver aid. WFP is also supporting the community-run initiatives to deliver daily hot meals in the Jebel Alia locality and has endured intense fighting throughout the conflict. And it's a good opportunity again to remind the parties of their obligations under international law to facilitate humanitarian delivery. Turning to the Great Lakes, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our Special Envoy for the Great Lakes, Huang Xia, has expressed his concern at the rapidly deteriorating security situation in the eastern part of the country. He urges the parties to the conflict to prioritize dialogue within the framework of the Luanda and Nairobi regional peace processes and to refrain from any acts likely to constitute violations of national and regional commitments made under the Peace, Security, and Cooperation Framework for the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the greater region. To this end, he calls for an urgent convening of the 12th high-level meeting of the Regional Oversight Mechanism of the Peace and Security and Cooperation Framework to enable the heads of state of the region to address the ongoing crisis in the eastern DRC. And to give you a bit more granularity about that crisis, our humanitarian colleagues are telling us more about the impact of violence in Masisi territory in North Kivu and the impact it's having on civilians yet again. Between the first of the year and the 5th, over 100,000 people were forced to flee the fighting between the M23 and the Congolese army and their allies in Masisi territory. As we mentioned yesterday, some civilians were killed and injured in the fighting. In the final months of 2024, violent attacks by different armed groups have also increased in the eastern part of the DRC, resulting in population displacement. At the end of December, more than 2.7 million people were displaced in North Kivu province alone. And between September and December of last year, partners reported at least 138 people killed and more than 100 others kidnapped. People are constantly on the move as fighting stops or resumes, increasing the vulnerabilities of those trying to seek safety. The conflict there also impacts humanitarian access. Many organizations maintain a limited presence on the ground, and we are closely monitoring the security situation to adjust operations. OCHA calls on all parties to the conflict, as well as those with influence over them, to ensure the safety of civilians and humanitarians and their assets, and to ensure unhindered and unimpeded humanitarian activities. Also want to flag that regarding the situation in Venezuela, that the Secretary General is deeply concerned about reports of further arbitrary detention and persecution against members of the opposition, as well as to relatives of members of the opposition, also human rights defenders and members of civil society organizations. The Secretary General calls on for the respect of international human rights rules and standards in Venezuela. He recalls that no one should be subjected to arbitrary arrest or detention, and that everyone has the right to freedom of expression, including the freedom to hold opinions without interference, as well as the right of peaceful assembly. And our colleagues at the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, today said that saving lives of Rohingya refugees should be a priority and called on countries in the region to assist those refugees. A total of 460 men, women, and children have so far arrived by boat in countries in the region this year, and that's just in 8 days. That they've just fled increased fighting and have gone to Malaysia, Indonesia, after weeks at sea. 10 people have reportedly died during the journey. Just 3 weeks before, another 115 Rohingya refugees landed in Sri Lanka after having lost 6 people during what must have been a horrific trek. UNHCR says there have also been reports of boats being pushed back at sea, and added that while states have a legitimate right to control their borders and manage irregular movements, such measures must guarantee the right of people to reach safety. And just a programming note, after I brief you tomorrow, we will have our friends from the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs to speak to you. Undersecretary General Li Junhua, along with other senior DESA colleagues, will be here to launch the World Economic Situation and Prospects Report 2025. The report will also be launched regionally in Bangkok, Beirut, Geneva, Mexico, Moscow, New Delhi, later in January. We have the president of UNCA here. Deji, please, manners.
Thank you, Steph. So, President-elect Donald Trump has reiterated that his desire for the U.S. to acquire Greenland and the Panama Canal, and he did not rule out using military and economic force in order to take over the territories. Any comment, please?
I think that question was asked yesterday as well. As I told your colleagues, we're dealing with one U.S. administration at a time. And also, I think, issues regarding sovereignty, territorial integrity are very well elaborated in the charter that all member states have signed on to. Why not?
Thank you. You were asked that question yesterday as Trump's press conference was ongoing.
Right.
It's been 24 hours. Have you spoken with the SG about it? What was his reaction?
His reaction is my reaction. My reaction is his reaction. Deji.
Well, first to follow up also on that. But yesterday, during the President-elect Trump said he's not ruling out military and economic coercion measures to get those things. Do you think that would be a right thing to do from the UN's perspective? It's not about the administrations,
far be it for me to advise any administration or oncoming administration. So I think that's a good question to ask analysts.
But go ahead.
Thank you, Deji. As I said, one administration at a time, and I'm also not going to get dragged in a Alice and Wonderland hole into speculative comments.
But okay.
Go ahead. You want to give it a try?
Thank you. I was just wondering, you've been trying to set up a phone call with President-elect Trump. Has that happened maybe?
As soon as I have something to share with you on that.
So he's going to be at the funeral?
Yeah, I mean, they may very well.
Is there going to be a meeting?
Yeah, I mean, there's the Secretary General's activity is to attend the funeral of former President Carter. Obviously, if he has conversations there with other people who are attendants, we will report back to you.
And did he know President Carter personally? Did they ever work together on anything?
Yes, they had met, notably on the work that Mr. Carter did in his post-presidency work.
And any plans for the SG to go to Syria?
Nothing to share with you at this point. Stéphane, I will come. I'm sure everything is related. Every bone in one's body is related to a different bone. Stéphane, then Abdelhamid, who I
Yes,
both
it's a
missed yesterday.
It's a follow-up of what President-elect Trump said yesterday. Did I understand you deal with the Biden administration, but did any, I don't know, the Danish ambassador or the Panama's ambassador, did any of those officials contact your office
No,
of
I'm not-
the Secretary
No,
General
but-
office to have, to exchange of ideas about the issues?
Valid question, and the answer is no, at least not that I'm aware of at the Secretary General's level. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. The Syrian interim government has been contacted by different officials around the world. Why the SG or his deputy, Ms. Amina Mohammed, did not contact any of those officials in the interim government of Syria?
Well, I mean, we are, the Secretary General is represented by Mr. Pedersen, his Special Envoy, who went to Damascus very soon after the change in regime. He's been in touch with the leadership in Damascus on behalf of the Secretary General. Mr. Pedersen's deputy, Najat Roshdi, is in Damascus and remains in constant touch with the authorities there.
My second question, as you know, on December 11, the GA adopted a resolution on ceasefire, and it qualified the ceasefire as unconditional, immediate, and permanent. Are these three terms now entering the lexicon of the Secretary General? Immediate, unconditional, and permanent.
I think the Secretary General's words are what they are. We've seen the Security Council resolution. I think let's be honest, I think the Secretary General has been calling for a ceasefire in Gaza before any of the main legislative bodies in this building called for one. Michelle, I will come back to you now, if you still want to talk to me.
Well, just on the issue of contact with the incoming US administration, you said yesterday there'd been some contacts. Can you elaborate on that?
No, not at this point. Deji.
Yes, on Syria. This morning, Geir Pedersen said that he's ready to continue work with the caretaker authorities in Syria, which still in one of the composition is still HTS. I mean, how would this go so far?
I mean, it's going. I mean, as we
so
have,
we don't consider HTS a terrorist group now?
Look, let's be clear here. There is a new authority in Damascus, right, trying to assert its authority over the totality of Syrian territory. It is only normal that we deal with them, right, in order to help humanitarian delivery. I mean, we've I think been very clear on the dire humanitarian needs in Syria to help with the political transition. This is Mr. Pedersen and other UN officials are doing their work based on a mandate given to them by member states. It doesn't imply recognition. It doesn't mean we're violating any Security Council resolutions.
So it doesn't matter they are still a terrorist group.
It's not that it doesn't matter, is that we have a mandate to fulfill, and we're fulfilling it. There are other parts in the world where we have to talk to groups who may be on lists as well, and we do it because they're the de facto authorities in a place, and we have to do it to fulfill our mandate.
So
and it doesn't stop us from condemning actions when those actions need to be condemning wherever they occur in the world.
In the Security Council chamber today, the Chinese ambassador particularly said that the de facto forces, they promoted militants from TIP, which is also a named enlisted terrorist group, militants. do you feel concerned about this promotion?
I think I would encourage you to read. Mr. Pedersen was very clear, right? He talked about the fact that as they're trying to unify the defense ministry, they are appointing some foreign fighters. So that's not a secret, right? And he was also very clear in what we want to help the Syrian people with, and that is to rebuild their country, to rebuild institutions that are accountable to the people, to rebuild institutions where all Syrians, regardless of faith, regarding of ethnicity, feel recognized and feel protected. And we're doing this within the broad spirit of Security Council 2254, which was passed by the Security Council.
Which does not including terrorists, right?
Which was passed by the Security Council. Ephraim, or no, Ibtisam, one of you had a question.
Sorry, Steph, I don't know if you've been asked this, but any reaction on the State Department's announcement on determination that there's a genocide happening in Sudan, that the RSF
Yeah,
is
I mean, I
committing?
was asked yesterday. I can repeat the answer, or you could check the transcript.
There have been calls for the UN to take a lead on this from now on, like including, for example, imposing sanctions and just take this matter.
Well, I mean, listen, we have, I think the Secretary General has been extremely clear in condemning and calling out the violations of international law of human rights being done by the warring parties in Syria, notably, most recently, I think as a few weeks ago, by the RSF. Our colleagues, I mean, just to mention the World Food Program today, are doing incredible work within a conflict zone, trying to help people. It is incumbent on the two leaders in Sudan to find the political will to stop this conflict and to have the countries in the region and away from the region to support them in that process. Ibtisam.
I want to go first to something I asked you yesterday about regarding attacks on UN convoys in Gaza by the Israeli army. You said the last one was, I think, last week at WFP, despite the fact that they were...
Yeah, it was this week.
This week,
yeah.
yeah.
This week, yeah.
You said that you didn't get any answers regarding also other past attacks. Could you elaborate on that?
Let me put it this way. No, I don't think there are any acceptable answers, right? Saying that it was a mistake is not really an acceptable answer to us.
Do you believe that it was a mistake, given the fact that you coordinate, as you do in any conflict, your movement, your cars are marked very clearly as UN cars? Do you believe that was a mistake? I mean, how many mistakes? I mean, it did happen several times.
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. The processes are in place, right? The contacts are in place. It's unacceptable that this continues to happen.
Okay,
And
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead,
No, go ahead.
No, but please finish the answer.
Please, you go.
Okay.
No, okay.
I have another question regarding Dr. Abu Safiyyah. When I asked you yesterday who is reported that he was taken from the hospital by the Israeli forces, you said you don't have any updates. Could you, and today in a press conference by Mid Global, about Gaza and the healthcare there, one of the doctors who briefed the press, Dr. Zahir Sahlal, from Mid Global, said that the mother of Dr. Abu Safiyyah passed away this morning, and he believes, and she didn't have any medical conditions, and he believed that it happened because of sadness and shock, and also believes that probably he's being tortured. When you say you don't have any updates, what...
I mean, my understanding is our colleagues at the World Health Organization are trying to get information, and they have not had any.
And how worried are you?
We're of course very worried for him and for all of the others who have been detained. Abdelhamid, then we'll go online.
Thank you. Ibtisam asked about the mother of Dr. Safiyyah. But my question, is there any contingency plan for UNRWA once the Israeli decision go into effect by the end of the month? Is there any plan, any preparation, any contingency?
Look, obviously we're preparing, but I think we've been very clear that there is no alternative within the UN for providing the services that that UNRWA provides. I mean, just in the West Bank alone, I think every year they provide about 900,000 medical consultations, about 600 healthcare workers staffing those medical centers, 2,000 teachers teaching in UNRWA schools. The Secretary General has been very clear in his comments that should UNRWA not be able to work anymore, it will be incumbent on the occupying power, namely Israel, to provide those services. We've had contacts with Israeli authorities, different, whether it's UNRWA and others, and I don't think we have any real clarity on how the laws will be applied, but I can tell you that UNRWA will continue its work until it can't.
So does that mean essentially there is no contingency plan, you'll just wait and see what happens?
Well, I don't, it's unclear to me what is the contingency plan to replace 2,000 teachers, 2,000 Palestinian teachers. So are there another 2,000 Palestinian teachers waiting to be hired? It's a question that I don't think has a clear answer. But obviously, we are not ignoring the reality.
So on a kind of practical level, obviously in Gaza, kids haven't been in school.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be the, you say there's no alternative to UNRWA in Gaza, but what does that mean for the aid operation in Gaza?
I mean, there are others. The UN system as a whole will continue to do whatever it can to continuously deliver humanitarian aid. Now, obviously, in Gaza, there's WFP, there's UNICEF. UNRWA provides some critical backbone to that, which will be challenging to replace. One second. Let me go online. Mike?
I'm sorry, Deji. Steph?
Yeah, you're not. Yeah,
well.
exactly. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Question for you. UNIFIL, actually a few questions. UNIFIL released a statement earlier in the week. I thought it was parody at first, and it turned out to be real. They voiced condemnation of an Israeli destruction of a blue barrier along the line of withdrawal and the destruction of an LAF observation tower nearby to a UNIFIL observation post. UNIFIL has watched for years, literally in front of their eyes, as Hezbollah built weapons depots and terror tunnels and an airport runway and missile launchers and scribbled it in their notebooks and passed it along to the Security Council. Never said a word publicly, literally, never said a word publicly. And now they're voicing condemnation about the destruction of a blue barrier. How can that be serious?
Well, I mean, Mike, I think if you look at the statements that have been issued by UNIFIL since this phase of the conflict between Hezbollah and Israel started, I think UNIFIL has been very clear in calling out and condemning the rocket attacks by Hezbollah and calling out things as they've seen it. On your broader point, their mandate calls on them whenever they see suspicious activities, and this is their mandate. What they have to do is to alert the Lebanese authorities and report back to the Security Council, and they have been doing that. I think, the blue. I'm old enough to remember when Miklos Gaspar, who was the cartographer, helped the Israelis and the Lebanese delineate the blue line. It was a difficult task. And I think the markers on the blue line are very important in order to keep peace, or at least to dampen conflict along the blue line. Your next question, sir.
You say it's full-throated criticism of Hezbollah, but I brought this up before. I did a search of UN press statements, UN website, UNIFIL's own social media pages. It took 10 months into the conflict for the word Hezbollah to appear in any UNIFIL statement of any kind, 10 months. So when you say there's been full-throated condemnation since the war began, that's simply not, that
Well,
doesn't play
Mike,
out
I will,
in what UNIFIL's done.
Mike, I'm a great believer in freedom of the press, and as I've told you and others, you are free to analyze what we say and come to your own conclusions, and that's your job. Okay.
Speaking of freedom of the press, my last question, I'm sorry, Deji.
That's tolerance of the press. Yes, go ahead.
You mentioned, I believe it was yesterday, but I had to tune out, the UN Watch report on UNRWA. And you had mentioned that you would rather see that play out on a direct level rather than through the media. I know UN Watch tried to set up a number of meetings with Philip Lazzarini and other UNRWA officials. They were all either ignored or declined to one extent or another. And as you know, because you've been included on emails from me, I've reached out to your counterparts in Geneva any number of times to get information on certain things that UN Watch has put forward, and they absolutely respond to or decline to respond to any of that. So when there's no response from the UN on this, what other option is there?
Well, I
think
you misinterpreted, or more likely, I wasn't clear enough. What I was saying is that any information that the Israeli authorities may have on suspicion of UNRWA workers or anyone else working for the UN being involved in acts that are not part of their official duties, to say the least, should be sent directly, and those dialogues should be had directly. I didn't mean UN Watch.
Thank you,
Sinan.
Thank you, Steph. I have one or two questions, we'll see. The first question is, Mr. Geir Pedersen this morning said Turkey has made a statement indicating a clear possibility that Turkish military operation could intensify in the northeast. Any comment on that?
I'm not going to comment on what he said. I think what he said was was clear, and obviously any intensification of military activities is something that is of concern to us.
Is it like a warning?
I think it is what it is. It is a reporting back to the Security Council of the facts on the ground.
And given the fact this morning Turkish drone attacks killed 6 civilians in Tishin area, North Syria, any comment about that?
Well, I mean, I would refer you back to my first answer to you, is that any intensification of the conflict, especially when civilians pay the price, is of concern to us. Okay, Deji, Stéphane, and then we'll close it out.
Just very quickly about UNRWA, let me just ask you this question. Is UNRWA ready to close its operation in Israel once Israel decided to implement in the 2 bills passed by Knesset?
What does that mean? Is it ready?
Will UNRWA follow the order?
Let me put it, we fully understand, let me put it, the laws were passed.
Yeah.
We're still trying, months after they were passed, trying to get clarification and clear clarification from the Israeli authorities as what exactly the implementation is, because we're not getting the same answers from different interlocutors. Obviously, we will not, if we're blocked from operating, we will be blocked from operating. Stefano.
Yes, as a follow-up, are, I don't know, WFP, UNICEF, and other agencies ready to absorb some of the personnel of UNRWA in order to operate?
It is, and we've talked about this, the different structures under which UNRWA and UNICEF operates. And frankly, if the issue is with the people, the Palestinians who work for UNRWA, weren't those same issues applied if you stuck a different logo on them? Thank you. No, I'm done. Thank you.